seeking by the stars the truth I strive to find. Who am I to question the sacred blessing, son? I fought the Torah, and the Torah won.
The Christian and the law. Ask most evangelical Christians in the last 50 years about the law, and the majority would say it was nailed to the cross or done away with. They don't even understand the concept of the law. They've just been taught by their pastors that it's either been done away with, abrogated, whatever the term is, but there's a function to the law, and that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at this subject of the law as it pertains to Christians, because there is a lot of misunderstanding and some intentional misdirection in teaching. But first, we got to establish what the law is. Actually, the phrase in the New Testament is just nomos. The Greek word nomos means law. It can apply to any kind of statute, judgment, contract, things like that. But in Hebrew, the Torah is what's referred to as the law. But the Torah is more than just law. Torah actually means instruction. Now, inside those instructions are laws. They're called hooks, and judgments called mishpat or mishpatim. So you have judgments, rules, regulations inside of this instruction called the Torah. But at the foundation of these rules, instructions, and teachings, you have a marriage contract. In Judaism, that's referred to as a ketubah. Now, Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 8 through 14, speaks of the Almighty marrying Israel. It actually focuses in on Jerusalem or Jewish Israel there, but the overall passage of Ezekiel 16 is the fact that at Sinai, the Most High Yah marries Israel. We're going to look at some scriptures relating to that, like what Israel says at Sinai, whatever he says we will do. And then we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 8, where it says if they don't speak according to the Torah and the witness, it's because they have no light or understanding. So the witness is the Ten Commandments, because the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, is called the seat of witness. Inside that chest contains the Ten Commandments or the marriage contract with Israel. So it's a marriage contract. In that fact, it's a law, a legal document that Israel accepted. But Frank, I've been taught I'm not Israel, I'm the church. How does that apply to me? We're going to dive into that and see. But understand first that Torah is instruction, and inside that instructions, there's laws and judgments. That nuances everything, especially as we understand Paul in reference to the law. And we're going to look at some other issues as we move forward in this, and hopefully it won't be too long, but we'll give you a clear understanding concerning the law. Well, we're back for the next phase of teaching on the Christian and the law. When Moses leads the children of Israel and the mixed multitude that goes with them out of Egypt, they eventually get to Mount Sinai. And there's where they get the ketubah, the Ten Commandments, which is the foundational basis for the rest of the law or the Torah. Egypt is a country, or was a country, whose belief system in the afterlife was quite robust. There's the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which they found a 52 section copy of in an Egyptian tomb in very good condition, which has prayers for the dead, incantations, spells, how to get somebody into the afterlife and provide for them. It's strikingly interesting that when Moses gets the Ten Commandments and eventually the rest of what's called the Torah or the Pentateuch, that there's a real absence of prayers for the dead, incantations, spells, or anything related to the afterlife. Yet in modern Christianity, the idea of going to heaven versus going to hell or an afterlife is very focused on. But here we have the Torah, or the law, which we've already explained to you as an instruction containing laws and judgments, that's almost totally absent of anything about an afterlife. Remember, Genesis is contained as part of the Torah. It's the historical account up to Exodus, or the people being led out of Egypt into the wilderness. And it's almost absent of anything to do that you could say with an afterlife. No prayers, no incantations, no spells, no how do you get to heaven, so to speak, concepts. This is why there was a difference in Yeshua, or Jesus' day, as most of you know him, between the Sadducees and the Pharisees concerning an afterlife, with the Pharisees taking a different position than the New Testament says the Sadducees took in relationship to the state of the dead. It's mainly a constitution for a nation. That's the whole gist of the Torah, is how man is to relate to man, how brother is to treat brother. For instance, Leviticus 19:18 says, don't bear vengeance or grudge against the children of your people. And then we get that famous part, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, for I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, quoted there. This is elucidated to love your neighbor as yourself in the teachings of Yeshua, or Jesus. But there's a whole foundation about how you're to treat your brother, your neighbor. So in essence, we have a constitution to the nation of Israel to conduct business, relations, things like that, that are what are the civil part of the law or the Torah. And that has nothing to do with, per se, going to heaven. It actually has a lot to do with bringing the principles of heaven to earth. So that's that constitutional part. And then, of course, there's going to be the priesthood, the structure of the tabernacle, and eventually the temple, where we deal with more spiritual issues. But these are all grounded or founded in the idea of first your relationship to your brother, and then your relationship to Elohim, or who people refer to as God. So the Torah is a constitution to build a nation out of. Then it's a spiritual document, how to build a relationship with the Most High Elohim of heaven and earth. And that's the primary focus. People talk about keeping the law to be saved and all that. Those concepts come up in later Christianity. We're going to look at our other phase or section as to what Yeshua or Jesus says about the Torah, then what Paul says about the Torah or the law, as most people understand it. So now we're going to do a few verses, and we'll paste them over the video in relationship to this idea of a constitution, then the ceremonial aspects or the religious aspects of the Torah. And of course, we can't cover everything. There's a lot to be covered. So we're going to hit some important verses. Anyhow, thank you all very much. We'll move on to the next phase pretty soon. Shalom again, everyone. As we build up on this series about the law, this is going to be phase 3, and we're going to probably do a phase 4 in what Yeshua, Jesus, and the apostles like Paul and James taught concerning the law. But let's look at just a few of the many, many scriptures that talk about the law or the Torah, the instructions of the Almighty Yah, with its laws and with its judgments. Joshua chapter 1 verse 8 says, the book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that you may observe to do all that is written therein. For then you shall make your way prosperous and have good success. So there's a promise right there in the Almighty's word, not just to Joshua, but to the nation and to individuals who will seek to walk in his commandments and his ways, that they will prosper. And this is not just money or material gains, though sometimes it's that, but they will prosper spiritually, they will prosper in their soul, and they will prosper by what the righteousness of the Torah works in them for righteousness. Because there's two types of righteousness: imputed righteousness, and we'll talk about that, and merited righteousness, and both play a part in this whole discussion about the law. Let's look at a few other verses. Proverbs 4:2, I give you good doctrine, or teaching, as some translations say. Forsake ye not my law. So if it's good doctrine, if it's good teaching, why are men telling you it's bad and to forsake it? That's a contradiction of the Bible itself. Let's go on. Proverbs 28:4. They that forsake the law praise the wicked. Everybody wondering why our society is so full of crime, and kids are killing their parents, and brothers killing sisters, and this violence. If the society's lawless, may I suggest that many segments of Christianity have taught lawlessness concerning the Almighty's law for so long that that's trickled down into society. Like it or not, pastors, could that be a problem? Let's finish that verse. They that forsake the law praise wickedness, but as such as keep the law contend with the wicked. I've spent 14 years in prison ministry, and there are people that say, well, the Hebrew roots guys or the Messianics, they don't do any soul winning. I beg to differ with you. 14 years. And I guarantee you, no one's in prison but that they broke a law. Many times the laws of man, the laws of the state, align with the laws of Elohim. Walk into any court of law, you've robbed, stole, cheated, stealed, killed, or just drove around town like an idiot, wrecking your car into other people's cars. All those are laws. They're designed to protect. This is a function of our laws under our Constitution. How much not, or how much more so than the law of the Almighty to regulate his people? No prisoner's going to walk in and say, well, law's done away with, Judge. Sorry, got to go. It doesn't work that way. Sorry. 14 years of prison ministry. Trust me on that one. Let's look at Proverbs 28:9. He that turns his ears from hearing the law, even his prayers are an abomination. That'll be a wake-up call right there. Do you want your prayers to be heard? Are you following the law? Oh, but my pastor says I can't do it. Well, what can you do? Not kill somebody this week? Not lie, not cheat? What can you do? Well, we don't have this sacrificial system. That's not the question. The question should never be, we can't do something. It's what can you do? What can you do? Love thy neighbor as thyself? That's not something Yeshua or Jesus taught out of nowhere, part of the law. Let's look at something very interesting, Isaiah 24:5. Because Paul in Romans 2 and 3 is going to build on a concept found in Isaiah 24. Verse 5, the earth also is defiled under its inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the law and changed the ordinance and broken the everlasting commandment. He's not talking about just the Jews here. He says the whole earth. And this is why Paul says in Romans, for instance, that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There's none righteous, no, not one. Well, Frank, if everybody's broken the law, what hope do I have? That's what we're going to end this video with when we talk about what Yeshua says about the law and sort of put a bow on this. But here's the whole point. Yes, you're guilty before Almighty. Not just only in deed, but maybe in thought. Because Yeshua said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Well, let's look at something interesting here from Bereshit, Genesis chapter 26, verse 4. A promise to Isaac, the son of Abraham. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and give thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall the nations of the earth be blessed. How are they going to be blessed? Paul talks about in Romans, that's part of the grafting in. So there you go, folks. Look at verse 5 of chapter 26. Why? Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Well, I thought the law didn't come about till Moses, Frank. We'll talk more about that. But here, Abraham, the father of faith, the father of the faithful, is keeping Yah's Torah 400 years before Moses is even born. So think about this as we dive more into the subject of law. Stay tuned for phase 4. Shalom for now. Thank you if you've made it this far. Let's look at some scripture related to Yeshua, or Jesus as many people call him, and to Rabbi Shaul, or the Apostle Paul, and what they say. Here we go. John chapter 1, verse 1 through 3 says, in the beginning was the Word was with Elohim, the Word was Elohim, and he was in the beginning with Elohim. And all things were created by him, through him, and for him. If that's the case, I submit to you, Christian friend, that he wrote the 10 Commandments with his finger on the tablets. He was in the burning bush. He was the guy who talked to Abraham. And we could go on and on about all the manifestations in the physical universe of the unseen spirit being through the Messiah or the Son. So he's the giver of the law, the good law. Now we're going to get in a point in this where we're going to talk about good laws and bad laws, because there's man-made laws that Israel accepted, that people accept, that are not in the Bible. So let's move on and we'll look at some of these verses. John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, keep my commandments. Well, if he wrote them, they're his commandments. John 14, 21. He that has my commandments and keeps them is him that loves me. And he that loves me shall be loved by my Father. So we have the Father and the Son here, no question about that. And he says they're his commandments. So do you love him? I know somebody's going to give an excuse that you can't do it. Remember what we said before. What can you do? So if you love him, keep his commandments. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 to 19, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit here. He says, think not that I come to destroy the law. Trouble is, too many people get to think not and they stop. Point is, there's people that are thinking the Messiah is going to do something that he never came to do, is destroy the Torah. Not just in Christianity, but in Pharisaical thought there were some things. That's why he's saying it to the crowd that day. And he says, for heaven, I say to you, heaven and earth could pass away before not one jot or one tittle of the law fail. We'll put some of these again up on the screen. So therefore, whosoever breaks one of the least of these commandments, he says, is called least in the kingdom. Well, thankfully he's in the kingdom, because you got to realize that Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 is one sermon. And in Matthew 7, verses 22 and 23, he recites the most terrifying thing any Christian can read. And there he talks about the person who is a lawbreaker that shall not be in his kingdom. The guy in chapter 5, verses 18 and 19, breaks the commandments, but not with ill intent, maybe out of ignorance. But the guy in chapter 7 is another story. You don't want to be that person that thinks they're following the Messiah, but is called a lawless one or a Torahless one. But let's look at Luke chapter 16, verse 17. And it's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than one of these laws to fail. That's chapter 5 of Matthew, talking about breaking laws, summed up in a really succinct way. So that's what the Savior himself, the Mashiach, had to say concerning the Torah. There's a lot more we could say. There's a lot more written in the Gospels, but for the sake of time, I think I've made some key points relevant to you, my audience. And where does he start from? He starts from the Torah, the law, and the prophets. So everything that Paul taught is not something he made up. It's not new doctrine. It's something that came from the law and the prophets. Now, if you follow some preacher's reasoning, they'll say, well, you don't need that old law anymore. I guarantee you, if you remove every quote of the law and the prophets out of the writing of Paul, it'll be unintelligible gibberish. Paul in Romans chapter 9 alone quotes more than 20 times in one chapter from the Torah or the law and the prophets. That's not just all the chapters, that's just one. Paul relied heavily on the law and the prophets. Let's go to Romans chapter 2. We'll jump there. Chapter 2, verses 12 to 14. And he says, for as many have sinned without the law will perish without the law. Because Paul in Romans from chapter 2 all the way through chapter 8 is not only going to be dealing with what most people say is Jewish law, he's going to be dealing with natural law. He's going to be dealing with the law of consciousness. He's going to be talking about the law of sin and death, which the Torah will amplify and bring to the forefront. One of the functions of the Torah. The Torah is a school teacher for us to lead us to the truth of Messiah. Think of this. You don't quit using math because you graduated from math class in high school or college. You don't quit using grammar because you graduated from an English class in high school and college. It all has relevance. It doesn't cease or end throughout your life. The same is the function of the law. I would tell you that while the law itself may not save you, it will sanctify you. And that's an important point. So as we see there in Romans chapter 2, 12 to 14, when he talks about the Gentiles who don't have the law or the Torah are a law unto themselves. In other words, if you're not a Jew and you're keeping the commandments, you're not murdering, stealing, you're following the Sabbath. In Judaism, they want to call that the 7 Noahide laws. It's just Bible law. Then you have a law unto yourself. You have a Torah. You have an instruction that you're living by. It will surely sanctify you and help you. To sum this up, I'd like to read y'all a scripture. There's many scriptures I can point to where Paul says the law is good. In Romans specifically, the letter to the Romans. So the law is not the issue. It's your sin, your rebellion against what you know to do good, to do the right thing for the right reason. That's sin. The scripture says in another place, he who knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it's sin. And in the same thought, the Torah is good. So, if the Torah is one that is written on parchment or stone, which should be written on your heart, or if your conscience tells you what is good and right and you don't do it, you violate the law of conscience or you violate the law of the Most High El. But the Most High El is rich in mercy. Let me read you something, and this is going to sum up the point. It's Ephesians chapter 2. We're going to read from verse 11 to 16. So, therefore remember that you were once Gentiles. That means if you were once something, that's past tense, you're not that anymore. In the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by those who are called the circumcision made by hands in the flesh, referring in his day to Jews and non-Jews. That at that time you were without Christ, most translations say, or without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel. Doesn't say from the citizenship of the church. That's the dangerous doctrine, that you're part of something called the universal church, but you're not. Citizenship of Israel. You're not brought into an organization. by the blood of Messiah, you're brought into a nation. And it says that you were excluded from the citizenship, strangers to the covenants and the promises. Well, in the Torah of Moses, those are the covenants and the promises. If the law is going to cause you to prosper, as we've already spoken about, that's based on the covenants and the promises. At that time, you didn't have God or Elohim without hope in the world. And then it goes on to state very clearly in this passage that not the law's been nailed to the cross or the stake, but that the enmity, it says it twice, the enmity is that which was nailed to the stake. What's enmity, Frank? It means hostility toward the law. It means hostility toward the word of the Most High. At one time you were without hope, without covenants and promises, but because of and through the blood of Messiah and his resurrection, now you can be part of the covenant people, not a separate man-made organization called the church, no matter its title. If you've been fed that lie and believed it, now it's time to wake up. But the enmity or the hostility, because of the natural man, Paul says in Romans, that's against the law of the Almighty, he's taken that hostility and nailed it to the stake. So you can be brought into covenant and be adopted into Israel. Paul also mentions this as the grafting in Romans chapter 11. So there's the summation. You're not the church. You're Israel. Now, I know people will just gasp at that because they've been taught so long doctrines of men. I don't care if it's the rabbi men or the church men. It's the doctrines of men. Now you can be adopted into the family of Elohim, which he's never abandoned. Paul proves this again in Romans chapter 11, that he's not through with the nation Israel, in spite of the replacement theology and the dual covenant or dispensational theology. If you're in the covenants and promises through the blood of Messiah by the power of his resurrection, then it's a joy to walk in his commandments because they're not burdensome. Thank you for spending your time looking at this video. I hope it's helped you to realize who you are in Messiah. Stay tuned for more videos. Please like and share, and we hope to see you soon. Shalom on your home.